Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into, well, a really striking contradiction in the global economy. It's all about China, the world's biggest automotive player right now. I mean, just look at the numbers. It's kind of staggering. China has the largest car industry globally by sheer volume. They're number one in manufacturing, hundreds of brands. And when you talk about innovation, particularly EVs, batteries, all the digital stuff, brands like BYD, NIO, XPeng, they're setting standards worldwide.
Yeah. It's genuine industrial power, and the ambition, technologically speaking, very few nations can really compete with that in the 21st century.
Exactly. They've got the money, the engineers, the government backing to really push for tech leadership. But here's the big puzzle we kept bumping into in the research. For all this industrial muscle, Chinese car makers, they're basically nowhere to be seen in elite, high-stakes, international motorsport.
It's a ghost town on the grid, right? Where you'd expect a major player. You've got this huge tech base making millions of cars, but they seem to, well, refuse to step into the real pressure cooker. You know, the place where engineering claims actually get tested, proven, sometimes broken in front of everyone.
So that's our mission today. Let's dive into this silence. Why is a nation that talks so much about innovation leadership apparently unwilling, or maybe just culturally not set up, to compete where it really counts, in the crucible of racing? Maybe starting with how they built this empire gives us some clues. The history seems important here.
It does. If you look back, the whole strategy was very inward-focused at first. It was all about getting big, fast. Competition wasn't really the initial goal.
Yeah, it wasn't an overnight thing. You can go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s. State-owned companies like FAW, First Automobile Works, they were just laying the foundation, making basic trucks and cars, utility vehicles for China itself.
That's phase one, essentially. Build the base, get the volume up. Then phase two, the 80s and 90s, was super important. Modernize, but through partnership. Those joint ventures, the JVs with VW, with GM, other big Western names, they brought in modern manufacturing know-how. But, and this is key, they were learning how to make stuff efficiently, not necessarily how to innovate right at the bleeding edge independently.
Right. And then the 2000s brought the rise of the domestic brands we hear about now, Geely, Great Wall, BYD. They scaled up aggressively, jumped heavily into EVs, and now they're huge exporters. It feels like a strategy built on volume, adopting tech quickly, maybe even leapfrogging some of the traditional performance steps.
And that path, that strategic history, sets the stage perfectly for why the global racetracks look so empty of Chinese brands today. When you actually look at the top-tier competitions, the absence is, well, it's really stark.
Okay, paint that picture for us. What does that empty grid look like? Because I think a lot of people listening might just assume, well, they must be racing somewhere.
Well, they're absent where performance gets its toughest validation. Take Formula One, right? The absolute pinnacle. There's no Chinese factory team, no engine supplier from China, no one building a chassis there, zero.
Wow, okay.
Then look at endurance racing. The World Endurance Championship, WEC, Le Mans, where you test if things last. Again, no Chinese manufacturers in the top hypercar class, and none in the big LMGT3 category either, which is super competitive for production-based cars.
And those endurance races, GT racing, that's usually where you push material science, aerodynamics, battery cooling for EVs, right? Stuff that needs to survive extreme stress.
Exactly that. Even if you look at major global GT3 series or top-level rallying, think World Rally Championship places that just punish components, you don't see sustained factory-backed programs from Chinese manufacturers. It really makes you ask, if you're claiming to be a global engineering leader, why skip the ultimate test?
And that's the so what for everyone listening. Why should it matter if Chinese brands aren't in F1 or WEC? It might seem like just spectacle. We need to explain why racing is, well, a lot more than just entertainment for car makers. Motorsport really is the crucible. It's this unforgiving lab where engineers face impossible problems, often with no time. It fundamentally shaped the engineering culture, the DNA of Western and Japanese car companies over decades, maybe a century. When you're racing flat out for 24 hours straight, failure is very public, and you have to learn and adapt almost instantly. And this is where it gets fascinating, because the tech that comes out of that isn't some niche thing. It's everywhere. What are some examples? Stuff born on the track that's probably in the car you drove today.
Oh, loads. Think about making engines more efficient but powerful. Turbocharging was honed for racing regulations. Those dual-clutch gearboxes, DCTs, paddle shifters that give you those super fast changes straight off the track.
Really? Paddle shifters, too?
Yep. And safety tech, too. Anti-lock brakes, ABS, traction control, even the fundamental ways companies learn to build super strong but lightweight chassis using things like carbon fiber. A lot of that development was driven by the need for speed and safety in racing.
That's incredible. I think many people assume things like ABS just sort of emerged from general R&D labs.
The track forces the extremes, and it's still vital even now in the EV era. China's big on batteries, right? But advanced hybrid systems, really clever regenerative braking, and maybe most importantly, sophisticated ways to manage heat, to cool batteries under immense load, those systems get refined incredibly quickly when you push them to 100% power for hours on end. Lab simulations just can't fully replicate that sustained, brutal stress.
Okay, so if the track is where you prove real engineering mettle, let's switch back to China. What are they marketing then? If they're skipping the traditional proving grounds, how do they sell their tech prowess? Because they're very good at marketing.
They are masters of the controlled narrative. They use everything, state media, huge social media platforms inside China, global influencer campaigns. The message is consistent. World-leading EV tech, amazing AI integration, slick digital experiences, futuristic design.
The presentation is definitely slick. But if they're sidestepping the head-to-head competition, what's underpinning those claims? What's the validation method?
It seems to rely heavily on what you might call a technological echo chamber. Inside this controlled space, simulation and internal testing become the primary validation tools, rather than, going wheel to wheel with rivals on a track. The danger there is pretty significant. It can lead to a culture where managing the marketing message becomes more important than pushing the engineering boundaries, even if it means risking public failure.
Right. If it's mostly simulation, what specific kinds of stress tests, what feedback are they potentially missing out on by not being on track?
They miss that brutal, unpredictable, real-world feedback loop. Simulation is powerful, it can predict a lot, but it struggles to perfectly capture the complex interaction of sustained high-frequency vibrations, intense G-forces in braking and cornering, unexpected thermal spikes, things that reveal hidden weaknesses in components like engine mounts, suspension parts, or even high-voltage connectors over thousands of kilometers at the absolute limit.
It sounds like the decision to stay away might be partly about protecting that carefully crafted image of flawless innovation.
That seems very plausible. The engineering risks becoming, let's say, performative. It looks great in a simulation, performs perfectly on a digital dashboard or in a press release. But if you don't subject your core technology, the engine, the battery cooling system, the chassis integrity to the possibility of public competitive failure, you miss out on perhaps the single biggest catalyst for rapid, genuine improvement. Performance claims are just claims until they're truly tested against the best.
That difference between performative claims and proven, battle-hardened excellence feels really central here. Now, we do have to address the exception people often bring up, Lynk & Co. They've had real success in TCR racing, haven't they?
Yes. Lynk & Co.'s results in TCR, which is a touring car series, very competitive, but different from F1 or WEC prototypes, are often highlighted as proof that Chinese brands can compete. But when you dig into the details, it actually reinforces the point about reliance on external expertise.
Okay, so what's the deeper story there?
Well, the fundamental engineering isn't developed from a native Chinese motorsport base. The car's chassis, the powertrain components, they're heavily derived from established Volvo engineering. Remember, Geely owns Volvo. And crucially, the team running the cars, the ones with the racing know-how and culture, that's Cyan Racing. They're Swedish.
Ah, okay. So it's a Chinese brand fronting a car built on European engineering, run by a European team. It shows they can successfully deploy a winning package.
Exactly. It demonstrates the ability to acquire or partner for proven expertise, which is smart business. But it doesn't necessarily show the development of an indigenous, competitive engineering culture from the ground up within China's own system. It highlights the lack of that internal pipeline for developing race-winning cars and teams independently.
Which brings us back to the bigger picture, the sort of cultural or even political dimension to this absence. This national story of wanting to be seen as the world's tech leader seems, well, a bit at odds with avoiding the most public, most challenging engineering test there is.
It definitely creates attention. Motorsport, at its core, is wide open. It's unpredictable. It's completely unscripted. If your cutting-edge hypercar grinds to a halt with smoke pouring out on lap 3 at Le Mans, broadcast live worldwide, that's a PR nightmare maybe. But for the engineers, it's invaluable data. It's a lesson learned the hard way.
Right. Failure drives progress.
But China's model, often favoring state guidance and image management, might be less comfortable with that kind of public vulnerability, that very visible risk-taking. So the hesitation to jump into these open global arenas does raise questions about, how deep the confidence runs in their own tech when pitted directly against established players without controls.
It's about being willing to fail in public
Yeah.
to ultimately get better faster.
That's a huge part of the traditional motorsport ethos, yes.
All right.
The legendary automakers often embraced that risk. They knew that the short-term pain of a public failure was usually outweighed by the long-term gain in knowledge and improvement you get under that intense pressure.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up for everyone listening. We started with this picture of China's massive auto industry.
Yeah.
Huge scale, leading in EVs, and this strange paradox.
Yeah.
They're just not on the starting grids of major international races.
And I think the core takeaway is this. China absolutely has the industrial scale, the manufacturing power, and huge technological ambitions, especially in EVs. But their claims to truly world-beating, cutting-edge engineering performance, they still lack that ultimate validation, the kind that only comes from going head-to-head in competitive motorsport. There's a big difference between mass-producing good cars and engineering bespoke systems to win under extreme duress.
And when you think about how so much of the advanced tech in your own car got their hybrid power, safety systems, lightweight materials, a lot of it was forged in that competitive fire, where engineers had to deliver wins, not just slick marketing.
So maybe the provocative thought to leave you with is this. China's auto empire is undeniably powerful and influential globally, but to truly cement its status, to be seen not just as a volume leader, but as the benchmark for genuine engineering greatness, does it need to step into that arena, the place where performance legends are made, not just simulated or marketed? Is motorsport optional, or is it actually essential for that ultimate credibility?
Can you truly claim global innovation leadership and sustain it without being willing to put your tech to the test publicly, against the best, embracing that risk of failure to drive real progress? That's the question we'll leave you pondering this week on The Deep Dive.